So when we're looking at this dietary approach, I like to think of it as more of a lifestyle approach. So it's always important to look at our diet, to look at our time of eating when we're choosing to eat, to look at our movement in the day as well as our sleep. So for today's purpose, we'll only be able to focus on an overview, very brief overview of the dietary component, a little bit on the time restricted eating. Okay, so let's start with the diet. Okay, so I will explain to you on the next slide as to how we want to structure how to get in the correct ratio of fat to protein to carbohydrates. But I just want to explain to you what occurs when we adopt what we call this keto flex approach. Okay, so the first part of the word keto refers to the process that occurs in your liver. So we know that when our body runs low on carbohydrates, so we're taking in less carbohydrates, so we're utilizing those carbohydrates quickly so that there's less carbohydrates available for our body to use as energy, then what happens is your body starts to break down fat. And when your body starts to break down fat, the means in which it uses that fat for energy is by producing ketones. Okay, so with a lower carbohydrate intake, our liver is going to start producing ketones and will start to use these ketones as an alternative fuel source for the brain, the heart, and the muscles. Interestingly, one of the ketones that is produced is called beta-hydroxybutyrate, and this ketone is very important because it stimulates the production of BDNF, which is something in the body, or a molecule in the body, that helps to make sure that our nerves and our nervous system and our brain are well insulated, okay? And it also ensures that those brain cells are communicating very effectively. The second part of the word keto flex refers to a flexitarian diet, meaning that with this change in the ratio of carbs to fats to protein, we want our diet to be largely plant-based with an emphasis on increased intake of vegetables, especially our non-starchy vegetables, as well as aiming at eating a rainbow of colors from our plant-based food sources to ensure that we get all the different, what we call phytonutrients, which are the very specific molecules in food that actually talk to our bodies and make sure that our bodies are functioning well. Okay, so because it's largely plant-based, we still want some sort of protein with this approach. I will record another video in time on those who are vegan and want to try and adopt a keto vegetarian approach. We know that it's a little bit more difficult because you need to get your protein from very specific sources as a vegan, but it is possible. It does require a lot more food prep and a little bit more attentiveness to making sure that you don't present with nutrient deficiencies. But when we refer to the flexitarian diet, it does include some fish, some chicken, some eggs and meat, but remember, as a condiment, not as a main course. Okay, so it also involves key characteristics is keeping our carbohydrates between 50 and 60 grams per day. So I'll explain to you now as to how we do that practically. It involves eliminating trans fat, processed fats, and saturated fats. So typically you'll think of a keto diet and you'll think of that which is high in animal protein, high in saturated fats, meaning we're getting a lot of our fats from animal-based products, such as the fat on meats, such as butter, etc. So this diet is slightly different, still achieving the same underlying change in our biochemistry, but not involving such high saturated or processed fat intake. Okay. And then we want to eliminate some of our pro-inflammatory foods, meaning those foods that stimulate our immune system and in turn can stimulate what we call inflammatory brain inflammation in the brain. Okay, so we want to eliminate conventional dairy, especially that dairy that is high in hormones, high in added antibiotics, etc. But not only for the purpose of reducing those added things in dairy, but also we know that dairy is high in carbohydrates, so it's a little bit more difficult to achieve this ketosis per se. Then gluten, we know that gluten can poke holes in that gut lining. So gluten is, a lot of research has shown that to be inflammatory. Obviously refined sugar, artificial sweeteners, nicotine, and a lot of our processed foods. Okay, so the main two effects of this diet in the body is the production of ketones, which I explained to you, the means in which our body uses fat as energy, and then obviously lowering blood insulin levels. Okay, so if we look at a nice picture of how we want our diet to look, we see that this is a nice general approach to look at. So this diet does entail combinations of components from the ketogenic diet. So when we think of the component that we're taking from the ketogenic diet is definitely looking at the macronutrient distribution of food. So looking at our distribution of fats to protein to carbs. And then from the Mediterranean diet, we're taking ensuring that our food is higher in omega-3 fats, lots of color, lots of healthy fats coming in there, and minimal amount of grains. Okay, so I'll explain to you how all these components fit together now. So strictly speaking, if we're wanting to achieve ketosis, make sure that our body actually goes into the mode where it uses fat as energy, we want to get about 70 to 75 calories from healthy fats, about 20% of protein, 20% of our energy from protein, and then 5 to 10% of our energy from carbohydrates. Now, often people think of the Keto Flex 12-3 diet as being high in protein, but you can see that's not the case. It's actually high in fat, moderate protein intake, and low carbohydrate intake. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly run through all these levels. So we see that level 1 is the level in which we want to freely indulge. So in general, we want to aim for at least 6 to 9 cups. Now we're thinking of raw veg, of deeply pigmented, preferably organic or well-washed, seasonal, and locally produced non-starchy vegetables per day. Majority of these of the veg that we include need to be rich in, need to be dark green leafy vegetables, mainly because these veggies are not only high in all the nutrients we need to assist with brain health and mood regulation, but because they're actually rich in nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is needed to make sure that our arteries and our veins open up nicely and allow for blood to flow into our brain to take all the nutrients to our brain and repair brain cells that need to be repaired, and then including cruciferous vegetables. So specifically those that include, think of broccoli sprouts, cauliflower, bok choy, red cabbage, to name a few. Okay, in this pink area, we also see that we want to include a lot of healthy fat, mainly plant-based fats, to heal insulin resistance and to create those ketones to fuel your brain. So think of fats such as your olive oil, lots of avocado, lots of nuts and seeds, coconut and coconut oil. So I'll chat a little bit about that at the end, but we know that coconut oil contains MCT, which stands for medium chain triglycerides, which is easily utilized in the body. Basically, it's quickly absorbed, can quickly be used as energy in the form of ketones. So it can actually help individuals go into ketosis a little bit more quickly when including it in your diet. And then fatty fish. Okay, so if we think of fatty fish, very important to think of the acronym SMASH. So fatty fish, think of salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herring. The salmon is particularly high in your omega-3 fats, which is very, very important. Okay, I like the next level, that's blue, the blue level, because I like to call this upgrade your gut. So we know that there's a strong link between our brain and our gut, and there's a lot of research connecting the two, that they talk to each other. So we need to keep our guts healthy. So we need to include prebiotic rich foods. Prebiotics are those foods that are resistant to digestion in our gut, and those foods actually feed our beneficial bacteria to ensure that they thrive within our digestive system. In the Mediterranean keto approach, because we're lowering our carbohydrate intake, we're lowering a lot of our grain and our fruit intake, and those are often high in resistant starches. So we need to make sure that our gut is supported really well, and that's why I say it's quite important to ensure that you see your healthcare practitioner if you are going to adopt this diet long term. Okay, so in this approach, we attain a majority of our fiber from non-starchy vegetables and seeds like chia and flax seeds. When you are choosing your carbohydrates or your bit of starch to include, remember we want to keep our carbs to about 50 grams a day. We want to choose our carbs wisely, so we ensure that we're getting maximum amount of fiber out of the little bit of carbohydrates that we are including. So 50 grams a day practically equates to about half a cup, not more than any of this, of starchy vegetables, so butternut, beetroot, bit of pumpkin, sweet potato, half a cup of grains, so whether it's oats or quinoa or brown rice, and then half a cup of fruit. And remember that fruit to try and stay away from the tropical fruits, like your pawpaw, your mango, or your stone fruits, and preferably choose berries predominantly most of the time, or choose unripened tropical fruits, because obviously the less ripened our fruit is, the lower the carbohydrate content, and also the higher the prebiotic content. Okay, so look at the orange block here. We want to choose wisely from this block. So interestingly, a lot of us overeat on our protein, so we only need about 1 gram of protein per kg body weight a day. So for an example, if you weigh 70 kgs, we only need to consume about 70 grams of protein. So 30 grams of protein, animal protein in weight, contains about 7 grams of protein. So you can work out what you would need according to those facts. Key with this diet is to focus on the quality of protein and not the quantity of protein. Okay, so as explained, we want fish to be our predominant animal protein source. So that's definitely a characteristic from our Mediterranean diet. We want to focus on where we get our animal protein from, and that's regardless of the dietary approach that you are choosing. If you have the luxury, not even or the sources available to choose grass-fed, pasture-raised red meats or poultry and wild-caught seafood, and same with eggs, grass-fed, pastured chickens that produce the eggs, then please do that, because we know that we then ensuring that our meat is exceptionally of a high standard and higher in omega-3s and lower in omega-6s. So that's something to consider. Then I look at level 4, which I like to include a name or term our indulgences. So if necessary, use limited amounts of approved sweeteners. So stevia, erythritol are all fine, a little bit of xylitol. And then to choose sweet treats that are rich in flavonoids. So think about small amounts of high or dark chocolate containing high amounts of cacao that are low in sugar. Okay, and then if you are obviously do decide to indulge, then consider organic sugar-free options using those sweeteners that I've already mentioned. Low amounts of alcohol, think red wine when you're thinking about the Mediterranean diet. Okay, then we want to focus on time-restricted eating. So this is very important. So this is where the 12-3 part comes into that term, Keto Flex 12-3 diet. So it refers to the fasting times. Fasting is highly effective in allowing our bodies to go into ketosis, or to produce those ketones and use fat as energy, and proven very much to improve how sensitive our cells are to insulin. So ensuring that blood glucose moves into our cells really well. The 12 refers to the 12 hours between the end of dinner and the next day's first meal or snack. And obviously, as a minimum, we want to aim for 12 hours of fasting and 12 hours of eating. But depending on your genetics and any medical concerns you have, 14-10 hours is actually ideal. And then for those that really do have insulin resistance problems or some of those issues that I mentioned above, we want to aim for 16 hours fasting and an 8-hour window eating or window period for eating. Okay. So when we fasting for about 14 to 16 hours, we also know what that additional benefits are occurring in the body, meaning that autophagy is occurring, which means that the cells that are damaged and that we no longer need are being destroyed at a more rapid rate, and those new cells are being produced in the body a lot more quickly. So it's really good for cell renewal. We know that between those 14 to 16 hours of fasting that we're depleting our stores of glucose in our cells, known as glycogen, which then is obviously also helpful for pushing us into ketosis, because it means that there's less glucose available in stores to be able to go into the blood and be used for energy by our cells. And then the 3 in the name of this dietary approach refers to the minimum time that we want to achieve between the end of dinner and bedtime. So this will, by ensuring that there's 3 hours at least between your last meal of the day or dinner time and going to sleep, will prevent your insulin from spiking at bedtime, and obviously prevent your insulin resistance, and ensure that melatonin, otherwise known as your sleep hormone or your growth hormones, are made really well. So assisting to improve your sleep, your body composition, and your immune cells functioning. Okay, so just some additional considerations. So I've already explained that this is a therapeutic diet, needs to be used to achieve a